I hope. Got it.
Great. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to kind of our inaugural MLT Canada inaugural online international workshop that we're doing. I'm Greg Chase, and I live in Regina, Saskatchewan, probably the most landlocked place in North America. Is basically where I am. So you'll be able to find me pretty quickly with that. Feel free to just type in the chat where you're from, what you teach as well. I know that we have people from Canada, the US, UK, Portugal, Switzerland, Italy, Australia, and hopefully I haven't missed anyone as well as I've gone through the list. Just a few housekeeping items that I would like to take care of. Feel free to leave your camera on or off. It's entirely up to you, but I think most of you already have your microphones muted. So feel free to keep it muted unless you're talking or have a question. And if you do have a question, there's actually two ways you can do it. You can just write it in the chat. And what I would recommend, either put in capital letters question and then your question, or a big Q, just so that we can easily identify it amongst some of the chatting that goes on. Or you can raise your hand just through the reactions button, and then that'll actually put you at the very front, and then we can see you when you do that. So I know that our time is limited, and so I want to get to it. I'm just really thrilled to have Chris with us this morning, and I know that I have put his bio up on the website, and also even where you go to get the handouts are there. If you haven't read it, I would really encourage you to read it. I'm not going to take the time to go all the way through and read it, because I know we'd much rather hear from Chris than for me for reading. And so with that, I want to welcome you, Chris, and I will turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you so much. And it's such a delight to see everybody, some familiar faces and some new faces. And if there are any questions along the way after we get started, if somebody wants to put it in the chat, or if they want to unmute their video and, say something, please feel free to do that. We don't have to make it too formal. We'll find some natural pausing places to engage in some kind of question and answer. And at the very end, I certainly can address any questions you might have if you want to wait till the end to do that. But today we're going to discuss primarily aspects of essentially musicianship as it relates to playing the piano. But my work, I would say up front, has to do with a lot of settings. I've worked a lot with Richard Gruno, and of course, before Edwin Gordon died, I was working with him. And then I've evolved into sort of developing my own improvisational materials for helping people learn to improvise at all the levels of instruction, with the definition that improvisation is central to music learning in the same way that we engage spontaneously with life, we improvise with music. In fact, if you're paying attention right now, you're improvising with me because you're in the moment and you understand what I'm saying in a way that doesn't require that you read anything. So this word audiation is something that Gordon coined, but it's something that is practical and makes a lot of common sense when you think about it in relationship to how we learn to speak and how we learn language and how we learn to manage our thoughts. In fact, audiation is to music what thinking or embodiment would be to language. And I just want to give a brief, maybe 4-minute, 5-minute overview of what I'm going to do, and then we'll get right to the music so that you have a musical experience that will define a lot of these things. One of the things I'm going to do is just help you to define some ways of thinking that will help you understand how I'm sort of organized this time we have together. If I share my screen, I think it will show this little chart that I have here. Can you see that okay, everybody? And essentially, audiation would be like musical, or would be like thinking in language, but it's musical thought. And the way that I like to present folks to the curriculum that we've developed has to do with how we learn to listen, how we learn to speak, read, and write. And using those common English terminology, that terminology to start before we get into any of the levels of music learning theory or anything, just appealing to the idea that we're born listening and speaking. And speaking includes singing and moving and playing by ear and understanding rhythm patterns and singing them and chanting rhythm patterns and singing tonal patterns and improvising and going deep with that sound, that ear-based learning in the spirit of sound before sight, which would involve reading and writing. And we refer to these as the four vocabularies. So as I work with you today, I'm going to emphasize the listening and speaking vocabularies. And we'll speak near the end about how you can relate that to reading and writing. And the curriculum that we've designed for both improvisation and for instrumental music, the Jump Right In instrumental series, is a comprehensive way to think about these things that includes all of these vocabularies, but essentially in this sequence. So I hope that gives you a sense of how you might think about what I'm going to be doing with you. So if you think about, well, how would a kid learn this? Or when would a kid learn this? Or what is involved in this? Those are questions of method. So we're going to answer questions like what we teach and when we teach and why we're teaching. And then this workshop is practical, so there'll be a lot of how to do that. But there's not one way to do it. It's just a lot of ways to think about presenting the materials with this sequence in mind. But you can imagine if folks learn to read without thinking and speaking, it could be a little bit what I might, the folks I know well, I might call it dangerous. Because the folks will be pronouncing things and they don't really have a lot of thinking or feeling around what they're doing. And if you have a chance, look up my TED Talk. I did a TEDx Rochester's talk for the TED people, and it kind of defines some of those basic philosophical ideas that would give you a sense of my thinking on that. But if you think about this idea of reading as an active search for meaning, that's where the audiation piece comes in. Jane Healy is a great author. If you haven't read her book, Endangered Minds, I highly recommend it. And she says that the ability to bark at print is not reading, but many people, including well-meaning parents, think it is. The real heart of the matter is how well do children understand what they have read? That's the audiation piece, right? The reason of it. Can they talk? That's improvisation. Can they write? That's composition. So here it is in a book published, several decades ago, but folks in language arts are thinking about these things all the time. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an intro into some of the educational foundation of what we'll be doing musically. One thing I like to do, and if you watch the TED Talk, I like to demonstrate what it feels like to bark at print. You could have somebody read this paragraph and pronounce it really well, but have no idea what they're reading. And that would be the same as showing folks how to play the piano, learn the system of notes on the page, but never invite them to audiate or to improvise. So I hope you understand what I mean by improvisation. It's not just for jazz musicians, it's for everybody. And all of the repertoire that you teach, the folks that composed that repertoire were exuberant improvisers. People like Bach and Handel and Mozart and Beethoven and any contemporary composer. There is that spirit of improvisation. But if I read even just the beginning of this, the units of stellar distances, the angular semi-major axis of the parallactic ellipse is called the stellar parallax of the star. You can imagine pronouncing all of that and having good diction, but having no idea what you're talking about. Now, some of you may know because you understand astronomy. And this is essentially a paragraph about how to understand the distances between stars. But I hope that makes the point well enough that what we want to do is start with this idea of listening and speaking on our way to audiation, so that when we do read and write, there's context for that. And that's what this side of the chart says. We want to start with songs and start with the idea that repertoire can be the inspiration for our music learning. It can be folk songs, classical songs, jazz songs, anything that gives you the whole. And then as we break into the patterns of music, the rhythm patterns, the tonal patterns, the expressive patterns like articulation and phrasing, any of the dynamics, those are all parts of the bigger whole, which is our repertoire. So that when we do come back to the whole, it's with more meaning and more understanding. So, is my screen still sharing there? Can you see that? And so finally, I'll say two more things, and then we'll get started with the music. The context I'm talking about has to do with establishing a sense of tonality, a sense of meter, and a sense of style. Notation doesn't help us with this. We have to be interacting with students in a way that's oral, so that when we see eighth notes, we know the difference between something that has a style that is more like, if we ever do it down here, it's something like that versus something like, so there's two different styles there I'm presenting to you, and they all sort of have the same look to them, but they don't have the same style and the same sense of the sort of what I call the invisible parts of music. And so by establishing tonality, meter, and style, you can provide students with a wealth of comprehension by itself, by just doing that. Also, by starting with familiar music and moving to unfamiliar music. Much like in language, you start with familiar words and move into unfamiliar words, and familiar stories and unfamiliar stories. Okay, so are there any quick questions about that as I move into the actual practical application of all that as we work to develop our audiation? Because already I've said some things that are to the contrary of some of the teaching I've observed in my many years of teaching. All right, so let's move on. But if you have any questions, don't hesitate to stop me. I'm going to perhaps start with this idea of how we're going to organize our day a little bit. You can see the whole part whole here. We're going to start with repertoire. Repertoire is the equivalent of stories. And that repertoire can be taught by ear or it can be taught through reading it. But the repertoire is the whole. It's the foundation for how we're going to learn. The patterns and progressions are informed by the repertoire, and they're the same as vocabulary, learning words. In music, we learn patterns. Improvisation is like speaking. It's like learning by ear without the aid of notation. And we can do that, we can develop that as we develop our intuition for music, where we learn to predict and anticipate what might comes next from our experience of participating in music. Just like in language, if I'm speaking and I say, hello, how are you? You would know the next word. Or one thing I like to do is slow the tempo of my speaking to a pace where it becomes annoying because you're waiting for the next. And you know that I'm going to say word, right? So this is an important aspect of musicianship that we need to nurture in our students. And we do that through the audiation of repertoire, phrases, patterns, and put those into context of whole, part, whole. We'll experience the 7 skills that I developed for the improvisation materials that are out there. It has a little more to do with your reasoning, where we're going to provide some limits and say, okay, if we have these limits, how can we inform our intuition so that we learn to be more spontaneous in our music making? And how can we connect that to reading and composing music so that if we reflect on our learning, we can do so with a sense of awareness, a sense of being in the moment, and hopefully that reflection will help us as we move back into the more spontaneous aspects of what we're doing. And then finally, here, learning solos, especially with learning to improvise. There are folks throughout history who have improvised well. So let's learn how and what they have improvised so that we can incorporate those improvisations into our own vocabulary and become more spontaneous with the music making we're doing, especially as we learn to audiate at a higher level and go deeper into repertoire. So I thought I would start with some songs by ear and then move that into some basic piano repertoire. In fact, I was thinking that I would compare a song like "When the Saints Go Marching In" to one of the pieces from the sort of the celebration series. The Royal Conservatory has those ranked pieces, and Greg and I and Jan and I talked about how those are used a lot by many of you. So I think I'll compare those two tunes to help you understand the kinds of things that I'm encouraging you to think about in terms of audiation, improvisation, music reading, and writing. So let's move to a song like "When the Saints Go Marching In." And the first thing we'll do is start to make some music together and have some confidence for playing by ear. Now, if I were to show you this little lead sheet, that'd be one thing. But if I were to take it away, it would actually very much encourage you to only use your ears. All right, so I'm going to hide that from you. And do you know the song "When the Saints Go Marching In"? I hope so, because it's a familiar song. And what I want to do is go deep into it so that we start to pay attention to the repertoire as inspiration for our audiation, ultimately our improvisation, ultimately our composition and arranging and reading and all of that. Think about this for a second. Audiation and listening need each other. Listening and improvisation need each other. We listen, we speak. We think, we listen, we speak. We speak and we read, and they need each other because when we read, we should be able to speak about what we're reading. And when we teach composition, that goes hand in hand with reading and improvisation and listening. So it all spirals, but it all comes back to listening and audiating. And that vocabulary will be farther along than your speaking and your reading and your writing vocabulary. If you've ever tried to learn a language that's not your native language, I think you understand that when you start to become fluent, you realize that you understand more than you can speak in the beginning of your experience. That is definitely true for children in early childhood, as many of you know because you teach early childhood. All right, so let's do "Saints Go Marching In." The song we'll start with, it goes, "Oh, when the saints," you know it, "go marching in. Oh, when the saints go marching in. Oh, Lord, I want to be in that number when the saints go marching in." Now you'll notice I provided a little bit of a pulse. Everybody move your body just a little bit like this so you can feel the beat, and I'll sing it on a neutral syllable. And you see what I'm doing? I'm just tapping my hand on my chest, or you can patch on your lap, or you can rock your body like this, but some sense, do 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 do, do 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 do, do 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 do. Do 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 do. Now, one thing that's difficult for many people who haven't improvised much before to understand is that if you see a lead sheet like this for "When the Saints," I may sing something that is an embellishment of that, because that's what we do when we play by ear. It doesn't have to be, counting the eighth notes and all of that. That's not really what we're doing. What we're doing is learning the song, keeping a steady beat, and being expressive in the oral tradition. Remember, literacy needs orality. So when you sing it free so that you feel do, 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 or you could sing do, 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 do. I might embellish a little because it's by ear. All right? Everybody sing that melody. Ready? I'll give you a little intro. Ready? Do, 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 ba, do, 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 do. Do 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 do. It might help. I don't know about the audio. I'm going to turn my original sound on, and it might help me. I don't know if you heard that well, but I was singing with you. In general, when your students sing when you're live, you should let them sing and you listen. But over Zoom, I was singing because I wanted to get some semblance of what was going on. But when you're teaching your students, let them sing and you listen, and then you sing and they listen, much like when you talk. You don't talk when they talk. Now, having said that, in our materials, we have something called the teaching mode and the evaluation mode. The teaching mode is when you actually sing a note, like everybody sing the last note. It's going to be the resting tone, which is bum. Everybody sing that. Bum. And if you hear ba da 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 da, and you can hear the last note. Did you hear it? Bum. So singing with you is like holding your hand. And when I sing something like, if I go, and I don't play the last note, and I say, can you sing the last note? And you might sing, bum. That's the beginning of developing audiation. Can you hear that in your head? Do, 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 do. You hear that last note? Now sing that note. Do. And that provides context from within so that students now learn, all right, if I want to play that on the piano, we're in the key of C, and I play C, C is do. And we'll get to that in a moment. So that's the idea. How many songs do you know, melodies like that, where students are going to be able to play some of those melodies by ear? Now, remember, one of the things that was really important in my learning about teaching is that you know what something is by what it isn't. So you might want to sing this with an articulation that's different, two, 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 and you can move your body two, 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 with a little flicking motion, two, 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 and that tongue is a very great way to teach articulation for when they play that. Or do, 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 and that's more of a legato articulation, right? So you've got that going on. You've got a bass line that'll help us with the harmony. So not just the melody, teach them the bass line by ear. And before I show it to you, I'll just teach it to you by ear. It goes like this. Do, 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 do. So that's bum, do, 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 bum, do, 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 do. So if bass lines are new to you, if you haven't been teaching bass lines, you might want to just start with what I call pendular songs. That's tonic and dominant songs. That songs like, well, I had introduced you to Simple Gifts. That's 1 and 5. You know, that goes like this. So you've got tonic, do 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 boom, and back to doom, 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 doom. Tonic and dominant songs. Even songs like, I'll show you something simpler like Mary Had a Little Lamb, which is a very common tune that beginners learn, right? That's tonic and dominant. So It goes, Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow. And the bass line is very simple. You've got do, 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 do. So if I hide it from you, can you do that by ear? Do, let's go back to the key of C. Can you sing do, 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 do? Can you sing that? 1, 2, ready, go. Mm, 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 do, 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 do. And the melody goes do 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 do. Sing the melody. Ready, go. Do 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 Now you notice that when the Saints Go Marching In also involves more than just 1 and 5 and 1. It has that subdominant chord in it, which is not that terribly challenging, but you can do a lot of songs that are just tonic and dominant. You realize that the song London Bridge and Go Tell Aunt Rhody, those are the same harmonies as Mary Had a Little Lamb. You know the song Go Tell Aunt Rhody? Go tell Aunt Rhody, go tell Aunt Rhody, go tell Aunt Rhody, the old gray goose is dead. And the bass line is do, 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 do. Very simple. In fact, when you're teaching the first piano songs that you could help them to learn, that's both of those songs, Go Tell Aunt Rhody and Mary Had a Little Lamb and When the Saints Go Marching In, they're all in a 5-finger position where you've got this happening. And in this hand, you've got, right? And I would encourage you to think about how you might move that on the piano from the key of C, maybe to the key of F, realizing there's a position for the key of F. There's a position for the key of G. There's also, you can certainly do things as you move into the keys like D flat or G flat. The thing I would encourage you not to worry about so much is what's a hard key, what's an easy key. You might want to start with the keys that you feel are more appropriate for your sort of how you've developed your pedagogy. But keep in mind that anything you could sing, you should be able to play on any starting note. And that's sort of the goal. What I would encourage you to do when you sequence the technique is to start with familiar keys that you're used to teaching and move into the unfamiliar keys, but don't avoid the unfamiliar keys. And I think you will find that students will learn them very naturally if it's driven by a song. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I wanted to point out to you, though, that these songs are very applicable to the piano. And I would not only do them in major, but I would also do them in minor. So for example, if you have that Mary Had a Little Lamb song, or here's Go Tell Aunt Rhody, right? So Go Tell Aunt Rhody, the melody and the bass line, the same chord progression. How about if we did that in minor? We could do it in A minor. So any of those melodies and bass lines. Everybody, let's do it in a key that's higher for singing. So sing do, 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 do. We're in minor. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. And the bass line would be do, 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 do. Do you hear those comparisons? Major, minor, melody, bass line, tonic and dominant. How about triple? Let's do it in triple. Here we go. Do, 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 do. So any of those things you can do to help students audiate major, minor, duple, triple, connected, separated, tonic and dominant is how you can start to develop their audiation through those comparisons. Keep in mind too that there's a spiritual I love to use with the jazz style. It goes it's called Joshua. It goes, Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho. And you should move when you sing these songs. Do it on do. Do, 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 do. Do 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 but do 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 do. Now the bass line is just like Go Tell Aunt Rhody, just like Mary Little Lamb, London Bridge. It's in minor. It's a little bit more elongated, but it goes do 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 do. So the more bass lines you learn, the easier it is to learn bass lines. And I would start with these 1-5-1 bass lines in major and minor. I would even do Dorian songs like Drunken Sailor. You know, you might have, what will you do with a drunken sailor? What will you do with a drunken sailor? What would you do with a drunken sailor? Lie in the moon. And that's just do, 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 do. I'm taking away all the notations so you're not distracted by any dots, okay? Now you might say, wow, I haven't taught a lot by ear like this. Get some confidence, get some tunes that you know. One of the things we like to do with students in the very beginning of their audiation experiences is this idea of what we call musical enrichment. So I just turned the share off, but I'll turn it on so you can see what we're talking about with musical enrichment. And that way you can hopefully be inspired to think about all the songs you could teach students by ear. Here's Mary Had a Little Lamb. Can you see my screen okay? There's minor, triple Mary Had a Little Lamb, Go Tell Aunt Rhody, Yankee Doodle, Clementine, America, Simple Gifts, Sleep Baby Sleep, Coventry Carol, Snake Dance, This Old Hammer, All on Anita Nana. The list continues. Hot Cross Buns, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, all of these things, right? Now, as you start to get into these songs, you start to realize that they have some bass lines in common. So that, let's see if I go in here and share my sound. The bass line, for example, for Twinkle Twinkle Little Star is a very common bass line that's in a lot of music. It actually, the Italians have a name for it. Does anybody know the name of that? It's one of the many partimenti that the Italians have tried to develop or tried to classify as they developed their creativity skills. And you don't have to learn the Italian names, but I'll put it in the chat. Passamezzo Moderno is what it's called. Passamezzo Moderno. And it's just the name the Italians gave to a bass line that's very common. If you learn, for example, I'll get back to When the Saints Go Marching In through the Passamezzo Moderno. But if you have, if this is Do, the Passamezzo Moderno is a bass line that goes from Do to Fa to Do to So to Do. So just sing that bass. Do, 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 do. One more time. Do, 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 do. So you know the song Twinkle. Well, that's a very ornamented way of doing 1 to 4. It goes to fa, to do, to so, do, so. There's that progression. Do. So that's one of the reasons why I think Mozart did variations on it, because it is a very common chord progression. And how many rhythm patterns do you hear in Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star? It goes ba, 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 ba. And then is the next one different or the same? It's the same. Ba, 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 ba. And is the next one the same or different? It's the same. It's only got one rhythm pattern in the whole song. Everybody. Ba, 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 ba. 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 In fact, most of the repertoire that you're teaching only has perhaps 2, maybe 1 rhythm patterns in it. Some pieces are more advanced, they have more rhythm patterns, but some of the most incredible pieces of literature have 1 rhythm pattern. You think about the 7th Symphony of Beethoven, the movement that goes like this. And just in case you didn't get it the first time, right? And then what happens is that Beethoven keeps that rhythm pattern, ba, 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 alive for the 9 minutes. And he layers in things like, you know that one? That's an amazing piece of music. But you know that that rhythm pattern, ba, 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 is the same rhythm pattern as Go Tell Aunt Rhody. Ba, 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 right? And you notice in the reuse of material, in fact, the text, go tell Aunt Rhody, go tell Aunt Rhody, go tell Aunt Rhody, the old gray goose is dead. You realize that the poets have a name for that. Does anybody know the poetic name for when you repeat something 3 times like that? Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Or 'tis the gift to be simple, 'tis the gift to be free, 'tis the gift to come down where you ought to be. Or Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. What does anybody know the poetic name for that? There's a name for that. And it also is an instrumental music technique for writing. I'll put it in the chat. It's called a tricolon. So for example, ba 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 ba, ba 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 ba, ba 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 ba. It's a tricolon. Listen for tricolons. They're all over the place. And that's what I want you to think about in terms of helping students pay attention. Oh, when the saints go marching in, oh, when the saints go marching in, right? Ba, 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 does it again. Ba, 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 does it again. Ba, 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 ba. And the third one is typically longer. It seems to be pleasing. It doesn't have to be longer, but on tricolons, the third one is typically longer. So think about how musical enrichment combined with all these songs you're learning can inform your audiation and help students learn to play by ear. And the musical enrichment is defined by these criteria. You've got, am I sharing can you see the screen okay? No, I'm just sharing the sound. Okay, let me share the screen. Okay, musical enrichment is defined by these criteria. Have the students sing the song with and without words. Now, be careful of words. They're very helpful because they allow for us to understand expressive qualities in music. We can start paying attention to the poetry and the lyricism, the music of the language, because really everything is music to me. Even language is music. So keep in mind that when you learn a song like um, Clementine, oh my darling, oh my darling, oh my darling Clementine, right? That's a very interesting way to learn about some reuse of material and some poetic understanding. But be careful, because sometimes students will be so gravitated to the words, they'll start speaking rather than singing. So in our materials, we have everybody sing on a neutral syllable like do, 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 and do, 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 do. So they have a purely musical connection to the articulation and all of the musical dimensions, and they're not as distracted by the speaking. And folks usually are lazy speakers anyway, and they speak in a part of their voice that doesn't allow them to bring themselves to their singing. But keep in mind that when kids are born, there's only one voice. Children sing when they're born. So if somebody who's an adult tells me they can't sing, I usually say, oh, well, it sounds like you forgot how to sing because you were singing when you were a baby. Or I usually say to them, they say I can't sing. I usually say, oh, well, that's a good start. And they look at me funny, and they say, well, what do you mean it's a good start? And I'll say, well, at least you can tell, right? And you have a point of comparison. And so singing the song is important with the neutral syllable. And of course, learning the words can help as well. Perform the song in the first key you might learn it in, and you're going to be comfortable with that, depending on the familiar keys that you like to teach. Then a second key, starting on a different note, a third key, maybe play a song with a friend with a melody or a harmony part, perform the song in a different meter, perform the song in a different tonality, major to minor, for example, or to Dorian, or to Mixolydian, and perform an improvisation. That's musical enrichment right there. So keep that in mind. Maybe part of your lesson each week is to say, okay, what are we doing for musical enrichment this week? That might be a good way. Now, here's a good question. Someone's asking, if the student is really off pitch and can't correct sing intervals of the song, I found that gets them really frustrated. It can, but you know what is the rhythm correct? I always go to maybe what they're doing that I can layer on. For example, if they're off pitch, it might be that they haven't sung enough functional music. I mean, do they know solfege? Are they able to sing the tonal patterns? We're going to do some tonal patterns soon that will help. But I also, at the very beginning, I encourage them, even if it's off a little bit, to be comfortable vocalizing. And maybe their rhythm is really good. So maybe do, 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 and they don't have their singing voice developed or that kind of thing. I would encourage you just to keep asking them to trust themselves that way. Also, I can tell you that a lot of students don't sing with enough air. A lot of times their air is not sufficient to supply singing. There's so many things that this brings up. Another idea is the audiation idea, that can they predict music in a way that helps them hear what they're singing better? But I'll revisit that because I think that's a good question about singing. For example, when we do the tonal patterns, we're going to learn to sing them in major. Bum, 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 bum. Bum. And we're going to sing them in the relative minor. Bum, 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 bum. So this will help them to understand, hopefully, the tonalities that they're singing in. If I establish this key here, and I sing, ba da 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 da, and the kid, you ask them, what's that last note? Bum. And they sing something like bum. Then you understand that they might not be tuning into what you're singing, or they might not have the executive skills to sing what you're singing. But as a way of going through their learning, encourage their singing, much like kids who don't pronounce words very well when they're young. We don't ask them to stop talking. So, for example, my daughter used to say her middle name was Little Lips, and her middle name is Elizabeth. but she couldn't say Elizabeth very well. But she knew that it was Elizabeth. She just couldn't get it out very well. So just we'll talk more about that. I just gave you about 5 different approaches, but the bottom line is keep having them vocalizing. And I see somebody is remarking about matching. I don't think about it as matching pitch. So that's another important thing for audiation. I'm glad that's coming up. You don't want them to match anything, much like you don't match language. You don't match words. The 4 things you need to be able to sing with audiation, there are 4 things you have to nurture in their life, because it's not about matching. It's about interacting, predicting, grouping, and comparing. So if I sing, for example, in major, bum, 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 and I sing bum, 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 can you hear if those are the same or not the same? If you think they're the same, then you might have trouble being able to sing a pitch. Our job is to help them make those comparisons through these 4 context areas. So for example, let's go to the song. Let's do the song Saints again. And I'll point out to you what I'm talking about. And you have simple melody. Everybody sing the bass line to When the Saints Go Marching In. And then I'll speak about the audiation of the last note in a moment. Ready? Do, 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 do. You sing the bass. Bum, bum. You're singing do, 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 do. Keep in mind, this is real developmental learning, folks. If you want to learn a language, for example, I'm trying to learn German right now because I'm doing a lot in Germany. And I understand a lot more than I can say. And so people might think, well, my intonation on the umlauts isn't very well because I'm not used to making those sounds. But I understand, and I need to practice making those sounds. One way to do that in music is when the saints go marching. And what's that last note? Bum. And encouraging that resting tone. But don't just do it in major. Do it in minor too. And do it with lots of songs. So we'll come back to that because I want to teach you another aspect of what we're doing. And I'm going to do this by ear with you. We have fundamental to our tune learning is voice leading. And I'll put that in the chat if you haven't used that term very much. And again, if somebody is just new to singing, be patient. Let them do the best they can. Don't say, oh, you're not singing it right. And just keep it in mind, just like a kid who's speaking and doesn't pronounce things very well. Voice leading. You have, for example, do, and it likes to go to T and back to do. Everybody just sing do, T, do. Right? And along with the bass line, do, so, do. That's really a beautiful combination. So teach them by ear to follow along. For example, oh, when the saints go marching in. They would do this by ear. Oh, when the saints go marching in. How I want to be in that 4-chord. When the saints go marching in. It's what is referred to as the law of laziness. If you don't have to change your voice, don't. And if you do change the voice, go to the nearest note. Or if you start on the 3rd scale degree, oh, when the saints go marching in. Oh, when the saints go marching in. Oh, Lord, I want to be in that number. When the saints go marching in. So we've got three or four voices to choose from. Why don't one of you So, or some of you sing the melody, some of you sing the bass line, and some of you sing those inner voices. And let's do it on do, 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 do. So one voice is going to go like this: do, 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 right? One voice is going to go do, do. And when it gets to the 5, it's going to go to T, do, do. And somebody else, you could start on do, do. And then when it changes, you're going to go to do. And those are the only 2 notes you have to worry about. And if you make mistakes, it's okay. All right, here we go. Making a mistake. It's raise your right hand and repeat after me. It's okay to make a mistake. All right, it's okay when you're learning. In fact, if you're not making mistakes, then you're probably not learning anything. It's okay. It's not, and what you play or what you sing might be the next genius idea. So let's be positive about that. Here we go. So you choose a voice, right? Oh, when the saints, or do, ti, do, or mi, fa, mi, or do, so, and do. Did you choose one? You got it? That's what it feels like to improvise. What you just did when you chose that voice is what improvisers do. They don't just choose notes of a scale. That's just what people teach. That's not how you learn to improvise. It's not that scales are bad, but improvisers they don't just say, okay, well, I'm going to play the Locrian sharp 2 scale. If they're going to be convincing. I mean, some people actually do that, and you can hear it when they play. So my point being is that the actual set of notes of a scale, you should definitely learn, anything that's available to you to learn. But the most convincing way to audiate what you're improvising is to learn how the notes lead to the next notes. Just like in language, you learn that words like hello, how are you, is how you construct the sentence. You don't say are, hello, you, how. That's not the way we unfold language. And we don't just spit out letters of the alphabet either. We don't just FQRPRSTRQFSPL. That's not what you do when you speak. And sometimes when I hear improvisations, that's what I hear. I hear people just spewing out RQFSFPQRLL. And that's not what you do when you improvise. Now, again, I don't want to say that you shouldn't learn theory. You shouldn't learn your scales. Of course, you should learn your scales. And you say, well, why? Because that's something out there that you can learn. And I know my scales, but you want to make sure that you understand context for that if you really want to have audiation take place. So be careful, because theory is something that can actually, you start to learn a bunch of names for things, but you don't have any experience with them, right? And that's what I'm trying to get at with audiation. For example, if I taught you how to spell the word dog, D-O-G, but you never met a dog, then would you really know what a dog was, even if you could spell it correctly? Now, is it important to spell? Well, yes, it's important to spell, because when you write, you want to say what you mean. Are you following my thinking about audiation? For example, when you spell, you have to be clear, but when you read, do you spell? No. When you speak, do you spell? No. When you listen, do you spell? No. So when do you spell? You spell when you write. So that's something to think about in terms of your pedagogy. Keep in mind that the answer to what is usually yes, but there might be some gaps you have to fill if you're not doing a sort of a more comprehensive curriculum that energizes some of the things we've been talking about. So, for example, let's go through with it. Let's have you sing that. All right, I'll play an accompaniment. You sing the melody on do, 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 or you sing the bass, or you sing these inner voices I'm talking about. Ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. All right. Now, when you learn to play the piano, it comes from that space. And we'll get into some piano playing in a moment. What I want to do first is I want to demonstrate some of the levels of audiation that you can engage in. And then you can, we'll start talking about how we can apply that to the piano playing. But remember, the piano is an extension of your mind, body, and spirit. That's what you have to think about. It has to come from within. All right. Oh, what did I do that was hilarious and a good example? I don't know. I love the chat. I think it's great. What did I do? Oh, you talking about the letters? I like that letter example. FQPRSR. Yeah, right. I like seeing it too. Remember the four things. I'm going to remind you of what I'm talking about. This relates to learning to sing, learning to move, because you could ask the same question. What about the kid who can't keep a steady beat? What about the kid who has trouble with articulation and phrasing? What about the kid? I mean, there's so many dimensions to what we're doing, and we have to embrace it comprehensively. But keep in mind, folks, this idea of interacting, anticipating and predicting, grouping and paying attention to the reuse of material, comparing same and not the same. Those are four key ingredients. Sound before sight, experience before theory. This is really what I've been talking about more elaborately, that there's a summary of everything. Now, there's a guy that foreshadowed a lot of our work. He was living in the 18th century and into the 19th. His name was Pestalozzi, and he had there are three principles that Nagley and Pfeiffer applied to music. And that is to teach sounds before symbols, to teach but one thing at a time, and to give the principles of theory after practice. So this is not new idea, right? And this is back in the 18th and 19th centuries, people were talking about this. All right, well, let's move back to these patterns. These are tonic and dominant and subdominant patterns. Again, you might want to start with pendular patterns that are just 1 and 5 in major and minor. But everybody sing after me. If I establish the key, if I have do, so, be, sing that. Or let's do it on bum first. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, bum, bum. Okay, let's just do that much for time's sake so that we make sure we are getting into some things to get you enthusiastic about what we're doing. Now, understand that those chords come from the song When the Saints Go Marching In. If I say, take the melody of Saints, do, 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 and I'm way in close, that's what the melody sounds like. But if I zoom out, you get this. Bum, 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 bum. You hear that? And if you zoom out even farther, you get this. Bum, 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 bum. Yeah, I saw Jennifer move her head. She knows what's going on. You're predicting, you're anticipating, you're interacting. Perfect. I love the video. I know some of you don't like to be on video, but I like seeing people. So if you go back and forth in those zoomed areas, that middle ground is very, very interesting in terms of how you can nurture audiation. So bum, bum, bum comes out of that. Bum, bum, bum. That's a subdominant sound of, oh, Lord, I want to be in that number that's fa la do, right? When the saints bum, 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 bottom. Now, remember, this is all in context to these bass lines we're learning. Remember the passamezzo moderno, right? Bum. So Saints starts off with tonic and dominant. Starts off with 1 and 5. It's just bum, bum, and then it goes to dominant, and then it goes back to 1, and then it goes to 4, and then 1, 5, 1. So it starts off pendular and moves into that passamezzo Moderno. That's just one of the many partimenti that the Italians named. But I want to point out that it's got to be a grouping for you, not just individual pitches that are vertical. It's more horizontal. And so when you go to that 4 chord, it should be very natural in terms of all the songs you know. For example, do you know the song Amazing Grace? Let's do it in this key. Amazing Grace, da 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 da, right? So it starts off with 1, da da da, it goes to subdominant, da da, back to tonic, da da, da dee da da da, goes to dominant. Oh, there's the passamezzo moderno. And you think to yourself, well, how many rhythm patterns are in Amazing Grace? 1, it's called common meter. Anybody an authority on hymn meters? Because that's a whole thing. The meter, common meter means this. Ba 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 space. That's called common meter. Now this is poetry meter. It's in, you can do poetry meter in duple or triple or 5/8 or 7/8. But if you want to do, for example, everybody go like this. Ba 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 space. Ba 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 space. That's Amazing Grace. But keep in mind that in poetry, you can also do that with duple meter. For example, I can sing, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. That's a Little Town of Bethlehem, and I'm doing that in duple, but it's still common meter. Or Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Right? That's because it's common meter. So remember this musical aspect, ba 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 ba, is a thing. It's not just a quarter note and an eighth note and a dotted quarter, etc. All right, so keep that in mind in terms of establishing tonality, meter, and style. Now, getting back to When the Saints Go Marching In, do you see how it incorporates 1-5-1, which is just a pendular back and forth, combined with that passamezzo moderno? You might be wondering, is there a passamezzo antico? Yes, there is. There's a bunch of them. There's one called the Romanesca. There's one called the Rule of the Octave. There's a lot of them, but we don't have to memorize all those Italian names right now. I'm just trying to make a case for the audiation of bass lines. And you understand the audiation of patterns is that middle ground. So in addition to the rhythm patterns, you would have these tonal patterns to the point where you could improvise them. So for example, instead of, I'll do it in the key of C for you. Instead of do, so, mi, right? You might sing something different. In fact, I'll do something that's not even on the page. Do, mi, so, right? Instead of fa, la, do, you could do fa, fa, fa. That'd be an easy one. Fa, la, fa, right? And then ti, re, so, you could do so, fa, re. And you get skilled with this vocabulary of tonal patterns, a vocabulary of rhythm patterns, and a vocabulary of expressive stylistic patterns. But I know a couple of you are familiar with this. If I sang do, mi, do, could somebody sing one that isn't that? It has to be tonic, though. It has to be do, mi, so, mi, do, some kind of middle ground of do, mi, so. Anybody want to try? Okay, go ahead. Your name, it says, it looks like a username. What is your name?
Marijke.
Oh, it's Marika. I know Marika. How are
Yes,
you?
I look a bit different.
Yeah, you look great. What are you talking about? Yeah, go ahead and give me something. Go ahead.
So you sang?
I sang, I'll sing something simple like do, mi, do.
Sol, mi, sol.
Yeah, so, mi, so, which reminds me of a song. You see what I'm doing? I'm going whole part whole like that, but it's just kind of fun. You don't have to do that. But again, this is the way you want to start audiating. And thank you.
Yeah. Before, by the way, you said you did pa 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 pa.
Yes.
I also immediately thought of a song. La la la. All of me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really good song.
Yeah.
Now, keep in mind that these patterns are helpful, but you should really only do them for about 5 minutes with students. You don't want to fry an egg for longer than 5 minutes or it won't taste very good. So keep the patterns to some kind of flexibility. And again, as students get more and more comfortable moving and singing, it'll evolve their audiation to larger and larger capacity. Now, let's do this in relation to a couple of things, to piano playing, which I've started to talk about a little bit, but also to the 7 skills I want to introduce you to, and then we'll open it up for questions. Let's take an easier song than When the Saints. Let's take a song like Go Tell Aunt Rhody. And let's see, I've got it right here. And think about all the things we can do with the piano, right? We could have them play do, ti, do in the right hand and the melody in the left hand, right? We can have them doing things like. Do you hear that? Do you see what are you sharing the screen? Can you see my screen? Okay. Or you could just do a traditional way where you have. Or the bass line in the left hand, which would be. Or the bass line in the right hand. Those very simple variations of 2-hand coordination or hands separately can do a lot for their piano playing as they grow and learn. Also, I have simple chords in the left hand that everybody learns. Right? I also copied these patterns with the piano player in mind. So for example, simple patterns that we teach in Jump Right In, the instrumental series, with the bass note in the left hand. And simple patterns with the bass notes in the right hand. And you can tell by the look of the handout, I'm still just developing these things. They're already existing in Jump Right In and in Developing Musicianship Through Improvisation. They're already published that way. But to be friendly to piano players, all we have to really do is put together some good stuff with the grand staff, have people improvise and compose using the more of the piano player feel of things. And that's what you see in front of you. So let's take, for example, the 7 skills on a song like Aunt Rhody and apply it to piano playing. Now, the 7 skills, if you're not familiar with them, they are a systematic way that you can think about let's see if we can get something simple enough. I think what I might do is go back to Saints because I want to show you a piece that's in the piano literature that would be friendly to this kind of thing. So let's do 7 skills, and then I will compare that to this piece right here. It's this allegretto that I know Jana and I have talked about before, but you'll notice that you have this chord progression in this piece that's tonic and then dominant, tonic, and then it goes to fa, so, do. So we'll talk about it. It's not exact, but it's the same kind of yearning. It's the same kind of harmony that would allow for a transfer from what they're doing by ear to what they might be learning in their repertoire. And stylistically, it's also fun to think about the different styles. So before we do the allegretto, let's think about the 7 skills. So we can sing the bass line with a rhythm pattern. Choose one rhythm pattern like Beethoven or like, I think of George Gershwin. You know the song "I Got Rhythm"? It's a tricolon. It only has one rhythm and a little bit. It goes ba 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 da da. That's the whole song. And the bridge, the B section of I Got Rhythm, is the same rhythm. Ba 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 ba. But right. So if you hear the song I Got Rhythm, that last part, it's just the extension of the tricolon. But the bridge of I Got Rhythm, it's the same rhythm. So I hope I've inspired you to think about you could create your own skill one by just singing the roots of the chords and one rhythm pattern. It might sound something on Saints like this, like ba 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 da, ba 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 ba. Ba ba da ba da, ba 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 da ba, ba 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 da ba da, ba 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 da ba, ba 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 da ba da ba 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 ba. Do you hear that? And then you could play that on the instrument, and you would teach them tonic. The root of tonic is there. The root of subdominant is F. The root of dominant is the G. In other words, this application to the instrument, we could spend another whole day, 3 days, 8 days, 2 weeks, a semester on how to, sort of get that groove happening. But the essential piece of it is that they learn to navigate the keyboard with this sense of audiation. Let me show you what I mean. And again, this is without understanding audiation, it's hard to understand the technical part. But we would say to the students that C becomes do. And here we have do, so, and do. And that's C, G, C. We have do, fa, so, and do. And when the Saints fits right under those, right into those 5 fingers right there before you have to even expand. We also, in our materials, I don't know if you're familiar, but over here in my studio, I have this solfege wheel where you learn, for example, C is do. So what would D be? It would be re. E is mi. You see how that works? And then on the piano, I might go to the key of G next. So let's make G into do, right? And learn how we can play the song in the key of G. So that would be here. And as they expand their repertoire, they can play either do, ti, do with 2 hands or with 1 hand. Any of these kind of things you want to teach them with their fingers along the way. But keeping in mind, and I might go to the key of F. You can even do the keys. Don't be afraid of those keys as well. I encourage students to do all the keys around the circle of fourths. And with the mistakes come learning. That's okay. Just get them all over the keyboard and play the song Saints up here. And even down here, have them play. And that was not like Beethoven, So you get the idea of that kind of thing. That's skill 1, baseline rhythms, really convincing. Then skill 2, I've already done it. It's called voice leading. Remember? Do, ti, do, do, so, do, mi, fa, mi, right? And then skill 3 has to do with what I've already done also. That has to do with how does that work within the progression of the song I'm learning? It's one thing to know that do, ti, do, but when does that change? If I'm doing a song, Mary Ann, you know the song Mary Ann? It goes. So, it doesn't change the same as other songs, right? You have tonic, and then it changes here. Now, does it go back? No, it stays. And back. Unlike, for example, maybe a Mozart canon. Which is the same chords, but has a different skill 3. The chords change at a more rapid pace. If I did Mary Ann in the style of Mozart, right? You could do that. Or you could do it in the style of Trinidad. Right? But it's still do, so, mi, or do. It's still the similar kind of vibe, just one comes from Trinidad and one comes from the tradition in Europe. So that's what I mean by skill 3. Skill 4 is that now that you know all of these options, can you improvise, for example, on do and ti? So for saints, it would be do, 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 do. Do 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 do, right? That would be an example of a skill 4. Skill 5, we've done a little bit where just outline the patterns for the song, and that's a little bit more of a challenge. It's my favorite skill to work on as a advanced musician. Is can I understand the tonal patterns for the harmony and present them in a convincing way that is lines up with the voice leading that I would like to do. So for example, here it says do 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 do. Do you see how that works? Well, what if I improvise my own? Bum da dee da da dee dum. Do that's tonic. I gotta go to dominant da da da. Tonic da da. I gotta go to subdominant here da da. Tonic da 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 dum bum bum. That's a skill that needs some nurturing and some love, but it's definitely worth the effort. Skill 6 adds rhythm to that. Ba, 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 right? It's just adding a rhythmic syncopation to it. And then skill 7 is just to freely improvise like we were doing before. Ba, 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 bee, ba, ba, da, da, da. Now, the reason the octaves are here is because, well, you wouldn't play them. You could, as a jazz player, play those octaves, but this is designed for any instrument that wants to play in this key. And it accommodates for the range of different instruments. Now, let's go to that piece I was talking about, right? Can you audiate the different aspects of what we have here, right? You've got this tonic, and that's an accented, a appoggiatura that gives you a little sense of yearning, and then the dominant. And the resolution is later, right? You hear how it goes. It's just like Mary Ann, all day, all night. And it stays on the mi. Do you hear that song, Mary Ann? Right? And so this does the same thing. And then it goes. Mary Ann goes all day, all night, Mary Ann. And then down by the seashore. And it stays on the D there. So that's very similar, the way those two melodies work. And then you notice that the bass line, or in this case, it's just the outline of harmony. The bass note of the second measure is probably G, but you have do, re, ti, do. It goes to subdominant, fa. And this could be considered like a second inversion 5 chord, and dominant, and then tonic. And you might say, well, do you have to know a lot of theory to teach this way? Not so much in the sense analytical theory. What you really need is to audiate what the harmonic progression could be. And I make a distinction because a lot of people know the names of notes and the names of theory, but they don't really audiate how it resonates. It's not really that difficult. If you make block chords out of this, you have tonic, and then you have a dominant chord that has that little suspension, and then a dominant, and then tonic. And then that's a very common sound. Did you know Happy Birthday does that? It goes, so in the key of C, it would be. It goes just like this piece does that. Having that T, La over Fa is so beautiful. You know the song Danny Boy? It's the same thing, that T over the Fa. So what I'm trying to say is that those musical enrichment tunes can inform the songs they're learning to read when they read or play something that's more in the tradition of this allegretto. And it's the same kind of thing. Also pay attention to the rhythm pattern. Ba, 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 ba. And guess what happens? Ba, 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 ba. And then guess what happens? Ba, 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 ba. It's called a tricolon. All these things come together when you teach the foundation of paying attention to the things I've tried to share with you today. Someone's asking about the difference between skill 1 and skill 3. So skill 1, 2, 3, and 4 need each other. And some people are confused by skill 1 and 3 and actually skill 1 and 4. Skill 1 is part of skill 4, but skill 4 also includes all the other voices you know. Skill 3 is when you know when the chord changes. So if you're doing a song like, take simple songs like Long, Long Ago. You know that one? Do, 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 do. That's a tonic chord. Dominant chord. Dominant tonic. So being able to know when those chords changes is a skill 3. Because on a song like Marianne, do, 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 it changes there and it stays there, da, back to da, da, da. It's still 1, 5, 1. And the notes of skill 2 are the same, but you have to be able to hear, it's called harmonic rhythm. When does it change? So I hope that clarifies skill 1 and skill 3. In the handout that you have, it's all spelled out for you in case you're concerned about it. It's written out in there. Now, before we get a little farther, I just want to say one more thing about reading and writing, and then we're going to have some questions, I hope. One of the things I wanted to show you was every unit of Jump Right In and Developing Musicianship Through Improvisation has this idea of learning to read and write music, of course. So the reading, the writing, when you have space for the students to write their own rhythm patterns and revise them, teach them how many beats are in a measure, and this is the most effective way you could do that. Also, where do the notes happen on the staff, and can I add the key signature I need, and do I know what are the notes of a tonic chord, and can I improvise and write them down? And can I write down a series of patterns? And a great way to start composition is to have kids write their own melodies to existing songs. People have done it throughout history. So Bach did it, Charlie Parker did it. All the great musicians have written their own melodies to existing songs. And so, for example, have them compose something to When the Saints Go Marching In. And you can be either say, just use your intuition and sing whatever comes to your mind. That's a great way to do it. And you say to them, write me a skill 5. And they would write down with the limits of skill 5. That means only chord tones, and you have to change chords. Don't use a lot of passing tones at this point. Or you could say only a skill 7 or skill 6 or skill 4. In other words, you could give them limits and they begin to write what they've been improvising. It's a terrific way to help them clarify things. And then their music theory comes to more understanding. I know that in the, I'll show you this. I think I pulled this up. In our Jump Right In book, in the very end of the book, we have a lot of music theory. Okay, all the names of notes and staves and the way things work and the lines and spaces and all this, right? And this will be helpful to you when you teach composition and arranging. The dilemma, to sort of end where I started, is that most people are rushing to these music theory terms without the audiation, without the playing by ear, without learning songs by ear. And I can tell you that the best musicians who are improvising, the ones who are improvising at a level that you can, I think, really get excited about, they know lots of songs, these improvisers. They do. They know lots of songs that are informing whatever they're playing. So keep that in mind, that music theory needs context and it's experience before theory. All right. So now let's, I haven't left too much time, but let's see if there's any other songs in the chat, or sorry, any other questions in the chat.
There is one earlier, and it's, these folk songs are familiar to us older folks.
Yeah.
Many younger students, especially those whose first language is not English,
Yeah.
are not familiar with them. Do you take the same approach?
Yeah, well, the first thing I do is try to find out what songs are familiar to the students. And it's a really large range of students that I've had. Many students, they don't know a lot of songs. So the first thing is, it's our job to teach them songs by ear. So it's our job to pass on the oral tradition. So if they don't know them, it's an opportunity to learn them. And they're good songs. The students will love them because they're good songs. Find songs that resonate with them. I'm very open to some quality pop songs, to jazz songs, classical themes, folk songs, major, minor, Dorian, mixed Lydian, whatever I can get my hands on, that helps them to provide a familiar context and foundation for their learning, which puts a little bit on us to be more comfortable with this idea of teaching by ear these songs that I've been referring to. And if they don't know them yet, what a great opportunity to teach them, because they're not going to go away. They're terrific songs that hopefully you can resonate. And these are the ones that I chose today. I know we have people from all over the world here. Choose songs that are familiar to your part of the world and have the same kind of potential. And if they don't know them, again, part of the weekly lesson, if you're a piano teacher, hey, what are we doing for musical enrichment this week? What songs are we learning? Are we doing the 7 skills? Can we do it in 3 keys? Can we, right? And then, okay, now let's move into the portion of the lesson where we're trying to connect our audiation to notation or whatever it is we're doing. I hope that answers the question okay. What other thoughts or questions might you have?
If you have a question, just raise your hand or
Seriously, I am so open to that. I hope that I was clear throughout. Here's somebody. Oh, good. Thanks for answering. Good. But I do want to say that somebody wrote in the chat that after about a year, the student that they had who was struggling suddenly started singing in tune and keeping a beat because it was part of the culture. And I think that's the investment you have to make with some of the students. Remember, folks, that it's achievement and aptitude. Some students do have difficulties either because their environment hasn't been musically rich or because their aptitude isn't allowing for some of these things quickly. It doesn't mean they won't learn them. So we need to constantly be aware of that and nurture that along the way as a fundamental part of audiation. Now, Rochelle has raised their hand. Who's Rochelle? Where's Rochelle? Hi, Rochelle. Oh, you're on some kind of a filter or something. Your voice is not clear to us. Oh, it's some kind of, is everybody else experiencing that? There's some kind of filter, Rochelle. Can you type your question in the chat? because it sounds very high pitched, and we're not hearing you. Put it in the chat. Yeah, thank you, Esther. I hope that was clear. I know that while she's typing in the chat, while Rochelle's typing, one of the things that people who get introduced to these ideas, there's Rochelle. It's still kind of high pitched. Is this investment in repertoire learning? I want to encourage you that the best way to help students develop their musicianship and their piano playing is to learn lots of songs by ear, by reading, and help them to compose and arrange pieces. One of the biggest ways you can teach music literacy with notation is have students arrange songs they know by ear for the piano. Have them write their own arrangements of songs they know. It is such an inspirational way to help them have literacy. Can you comment on the syllables for the bass line? Do you use neutral syllables, solfege, and 5 interchangeably, or hierarchy? Yes, so there is a hierarchy, Rochelle. First, neutral syllable. When I'm teaching adults, I typically move into solfege or some naming of the function just to help the adults in the room. But when kids are young and first starting out, just a neutral syllables first. In our materials, we're not a fan of just going through a whole song with solfege, like do, do, so, la, la, so, or do, day, do, day, do, day, do. We don't really do that because then you're drawing your attention to only one dimension of the music. What we'll do is say, okay, the bass line is on do, and so here we go. Do, 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 do. And sometimes as the students get more advanced, I do use numbers because instead of saying dominant or supertonic or mediant or submediant, I will say 6. I will say 2. And that maybe is my jazz background coming out. But again, it has to do with audiation. 2, 2, 5, 1 is a more monosyllabic way of saying supertonic, dominant, tonic, right? So as you learn functions, you start to name the functions. So for example, so, fa, re, ti, that's dominant. Or do, mi, so, that's tonic. Do, fa, la, that's subdominant. So instead of those, sometimes you'll catch me saying 4, 5, 1 because they're one syllable. In fact, the word monosyllabic is the funniest word I've ever heard because it's many syllables to describe one syllable. It's kind of a funny word. It's like the weirdest word on the planet, monosyllabic. So anyway, I hope that answers your question because it always, when teaching sequentially, Rochelle, you start with a neutral syllable. So it would be do, do, do first. And that makes common sense, I hope, to those of you who have tried to do some of these things. I didn't talk too much about rhythm syllables, but again, that means I'll have to come back and do more. But rhythm syllables, do, day, do, day, do, day, do, that's the rhythm syllables for something like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. So I can say something like, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star uses do, day, do, day, do, day, do. Now, can you improvise a rhythm pattern that isn't that one, but only use do, do, day kind of sounds? So you might get something like do, 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 day, do. And you could compose a whole song on do, 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 day, do. So for example, I could go bum, 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 as an improvisation on Twinkle. Or bum, 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 as an improvisation on something that has that chord progression. So you get the idea. What other thoughts or questions? I have found using numbers to be great, even with the young. Yeah. Especially if it's familiar, moving to the unfamiliar. Just be careful about theory. I have found that if you go to theory without the audiation, it's not as meaningful and long lasting, and it starts to sound less musical. I hope that makes sense. Yeah. Andrew Goodlet. Wow, what a good name. Goodlet.
Thank you. I have a question for when you're teaching more advanced students.
Yeah,
What starting to add in like 6 and 2 chords,
yeah, yeah.
and like you need the turnarounds in like every jazz standard, right? Or any jazz tune. Like, what
Yep.
does readiness look like for getting like bridging that gap?
Yep. So, wow, what a really terrific question. I have thought a lot about it, particularly for the DMTI materials, the developing musicianship through improvisation. And the short answer is lots of whole part whole with songs first. Let me show you what I'm talking about on the screen. I'm going to share the screen with a list of songs and patterns that will be helpful. But oh, I got to share the screen now. Let's see. Um, I got too many things open. Here it is. Okay. Right here, share the screen. Boom, boom. Oh, I am sharing the screen, right? How's
There it is.
that? So, we did songs like Long, Long Ago, Marianne, Joshua, Simple Gifts, and they inform these, progressions we've used. That's kind of where Andrew's asking. What about progressions like 6 and 2/6 and 5 and 1/6/4 and diminished chords and those kind of things? And what about jazz progressions like 2/5/1s and stuff? So, for example, a song like Green Sleeves can help you with some minor tonic and subtonic. It includes the Passamezzo Antico and the Romanesca. A song like My Country 'Tis of Thee, which is the national anthem of the UK, has all of these harmonies. If you can improvise to the first phrase of My Country 'Tis of Thee, you can improvise to all the chords they teach you in freshman theory. In fact, you could teach freshman theory. So, for example, you think about My Country 'Tis of Thee. That phrase alone, right? It has all of those chord functions that you could teach. But before you get into the theory of it, Andrew, teach them the bass. Ba da 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 dee, and do the 7 skills on that and nurture their ears and their voice leading as you're manipulating these terms. And remember, God Save the Queen only has one rhythm pattern. Ba 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 ba. And guess where that rhythm pattern comes from? Anybody know? Anybody a Renaissance expert? It comes from a dance called the Galliard. And guess whose favorite dance was the Galliard? Queen Elizabeth I. Therefore, God save the Queen. So it didn't, remember, the way we teach sometimes, I just kind of scratch my head because this rhythm pattern came from a dance. It didn't come from a dotted quarter note. So that's one part of it. Look at this rule of the octave, which we didn't really address today. But the rule of the octave is the foundation for sonata form. It's the foundation for American song form. There's a lot of applications of the rule of the octave. The Goldberg Variations is based on that. Charlie Parker has a song called Blues for Alice and Confirmation. It's the rule of the octave. You must learn the rule of the octave with your advanced students. And it's basically a harmonization of a descending major scale or minor scale. And we can come back to that if you wish. But, Charlie Parker, Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, Chance the Rapper, George Gershwin, they all knew the rule of the octave. It's a very important chord progression. And then finally, to answer your question, we've got songs like blues progressions, right? You've got this transformation is the chord progression for I Got Rhythm. Red Wings is an American song form based on Bye Bye Blackbird. I couldn't publish Bye Bye Blackbird, so I used Red Wings as a title. I made up that. So you notice the different chord progressions, Andrew: tonic, supertonic, median, half diminished chords, right? So it's the same procedure, Andrew, whole part whole, starting with a song and bass line, just like I did today with simpler songs. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just I guess the trick is like finding songs that don't have too many chord progressions, like the kind of medium level
Yeah,
of,
that would be these songs right in here, like La Folia, When the Saints, Amazing Grace,
yeah.
One Child, and finding songs like that. This taxonomy this scope and sequence is in the front matter of the DMTI book called 1B. So I don't know if it helps you at all. Also, those handouts that I gave you have some suggestions, but Andrew, the long answer, the long life journey is to learn lots of songs and start to be so familiar with songs that you can pull them out when you need them, kind of a thing. And I hope that answers your question in the short term. Yeah, terrific. I love that. I love the enthusiasm for that. Anybody else? I think one of the things that happens in a workshop like this, we'll get to drama, is that if you have more questions than you have answers, I did a good job. Because, right? Because you should be thinking about some things now that you might not have thought about before. Drama, what are you thinking about?
I have a quick question about the recorder one. And I was wondering, because I have a friend and she wants to learn the recorder, and I was wondering, is that for like a beginner to
Yeah.
use? Oh, okay.
Yes. It starts from the very first note.
Okay.
And I would wait to buy the teacher's guide because we just approved the book that's going to be published in about a month. So the student book is available. Okay. It came out 6 months ago.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And the teacher's guide is available, but there's a 2021 edition coming out in about a month.
Oh, okay.
And I can tell you it's very comprehensive. It would help you teach piano too, not to push my own materials, but you could read the teacher's guide in addition to the Music Moves for Piano that many of you guys use that has a lot of terrific stuff in it. This would also give you another way to think about music learning theory. It would also give you some repertoire that you could maybe apply to piano. And it's some of the work I'm going to be doing when we're finished with some of these projects. I just want to apply the Jump Right In ideas as another resource that could help you with your journey with your students.
Okay, thanks. And one other quick question about the DMTI, is that like, how have you used that with your students, whether if they're teens or adults? Like, are they beginners? Are they a little bit more, I don't know, have they learned more already before they started?
Yeah, a person using the DMTI probably should have about for the piano playing of it, should have about 6 months to a year of piano experience. I mean, it's not a beginner book, but the songs like I was showing you today, like When the Saints Go Marching In, and you could use the DMTI model to begin the journey of improvisation with them. But typically after a couple of years, let's say you were using our Jump Right In materials, if you had about a year of experience with Jump Right In, then you could go immediately to the first book of DMTI. The Jump Right In, and I'm only saying that because that's what I've developed with Dick Grunow. There's a lot of materials out there through GIA that you could access, but in terms of the repertoire development, Jump Right In starts you on the first note for recorder, which I've applied to piano playing, right? Or trumpet playing, or, recorder playing, or violin playing, or saxophone playing, right? Very first note kind of stuff. DMTI says, okay, now that you have about an octave range or maybe a 5-note range, play the bass line and the melody to Long, Long Ago, or play the bass line and melody to Mary Ann, do London Bridge, do Hot Cross Buns, do this, but let's do the 7 skills and get more deep into the improvisation of that. If that makes sense.
Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, so basically DMTI, the Developed Musicianship, took 15 songs and went deep. And the Jump Right In has 300 songs that are fluid for you to learn. And I took 15 of them and I went really quite deep with them.
That's cool. Thanks.
Yeah, drama.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. And then I never kind of forewarned you about this. Do you want to give a plug for your summer course?
Oh gosh,
that
yes.
you're offering online? I know Jana, Laurel, and I took it last year. I know that there's someone here that's going to take it this year, but I thought others may be interested in it. If you wanted to give a bit of a plug for it.
You are fantastic. Thank you. Because I love teaching in the summer, and both classes are going to fly. They're both already enrolled. So, but I just love the summer teaching. Let me share the screen. I'm going to go to the website. That's probably the best way to show you this. If you go to, I'll open up the Google. I just want to show you the dates, and that way you can find it on the web. So if I share the screen, if you go to either my website or the Eastman website, and you go down to engagements, and you scroll down to summer, here are the dates. I'm going to be doing a 1-week workshop it's going to be online through Gordon College, no relation to Edwin Gordon, in northern Boston area. That's the week of July 12th through 16th. And then I'll be doing a 2-week only in the afternoon. Save your morning free. And it happens from July 19th through 30. And I think that's the one that Greg and Jana took. Yeah. And it spreads it out from 1:30 to 5 in the afternoon. So you have your morning to teach or to assimilate or to do your thing. The one at Gordon College is only 1 week. It goes from 8:30 till 3:30 with a 2-hour break in the middle of the day. The one at Eastman goes only in the afternoons from 1:30 to 5. And there's 2 levels of registration. One is for college credit, which is pretty expensive if you go to Eastman. And one is just participant workshop, which is actually quite reasonable. In fact, it's quite affordable. Now, I want to go to the one at Eastman. All you have to do is Google Azzara Summer Eastman, and there's the class. And it's very slick. You just go there it is. It's for non-credit, it's only $500. If you want Eastman credit, it's very expensive. And then you click there to register. And if you want to do the Gordon College one, you do the same thing, just put Azzara Summer Gordon College, and you see there's a summer workshop site there. Now, having said that, there's some other music learning theory courses offered this summer. They're called professional development learning courses that you can find on the Gimel website. My particular courses, because I do so much in the summer, are offered through these universities. But there are other courses that are available to you through, depending on the time of summer you'd like to do it, that you can find on the Gimel website, GIML. Does that help people? I would love. Who's taking my class? Anybody still here who's taking my class? Yay, Rochelle. Where are you going to take it? At Gordon?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, through the Eastman School one.
Oh, great. Great. So
yeah, and just on that, I bought your 3 books, but I didn't realize there was a 1B. Should I be getting that as well?
Well, the 1B is the brand new one. But I think
Oh.
you're buying those improv books. The required books are the teacher's guide for the Jump Right In book, because we're going to start from scratch, from Dremmel's question. So make sure you get a hold of the teacher's guide for Jump Right In. And,
yeah, I have the first one.
Oh, good. Okay. And so we're just going to start. It's a 2-week journey. And what I did today in 2 hours, I can do in 2 weeks. It's much more, has much more breathing. It's not like I'm just giving you a whole too much, because sometimes in these shorter workshops, I'm worried that people are thinking, yeah, but he didn't cover this. And but I'm sure that you'll find it to be very comprehensive when you take the class.
Great. I'm really looking forward to it.
We've tried to think about everything. I mean, latest version of the Jump Right In Teacher's Guide is after 20 years of feedback on the first version. So it's cool. Yes, Drema.
Chris, I was just wondering because I did check the Eastman website last week, and then it says that they would like people to register something like before June 1st. Is that
Oh, no.
still?
You can
Okay.
still register. And if they have any kind of a problem, just write to me. I'll make it happen. You can register up until the day before the class at this point. The reason they have the June 1st deadline is so they can make sure there's enough people already in there that the class will fly.
Okay. Great to know.
So, yeah, go ahead and register for it. You'll have no trouble.
Yeah, there's so many Gimel opportunities this summer. It's like, wow, the whole schedule of July is like so full.
I know. So true. I'd love to see you in class. I love teaching the summer classes because it allows for a complete picture. People leave usually thinking, well, Yana and Greg will tell you, there's still some things they want to learn, but there's a real big sense of, okay, I think I have a lot of confidence for what's being presented here. So I really like the summer stuff.
Do you do anything in the fall or like during the year as well?
Yeah, it's not going to be online this year.
Oh.
But I teach my courses at Eastman. But then on that engagement page, it shows you the day-long workshops I'm doing. So if you go here to engagements, I'll put them up for the fall, but right now it only goes up through August. But I've got some stuff happening in the fall and spring. And I'll put those on the website. You'll see those coming up soon.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. I have to update the website. Does Teresa have a question or she just have her pen up? No. Okay. It's like an auction with me. If you scratch your head, I'm going to call on you. All right. Wow. Well, first of all, we went overtime. I'm happy to do it. I'm just pleased about the enthusiasm for those of you who stuck around. I think more than anything is that the stuff that I'm bringing up and the things that we want some enthusiasm about are big enough that they should be something that you're prioritizing in your teaching and learning. And so it's just a testimony to how important what we're discussing is. And I hope that I've provided you with some practical application for something that is philosophically very deep. I always try to remember that as a teacher, I think about this, that our students all have gifts inside that haven't been opened yet. And that as a teacher, we can help them by waking up those sleeping gifts through this kind of interaction of singing and movement and learning to play as an extension of that. And I did on purpose emphasize the audiation part, as Greg and I talked about, because some of the piano technique stuff that you already know really well can fall into place if you start to marry it to the audiation and learning songs by ear, in addition to the other materials that you've been using already that I'm sure have been helpful to you along the way because you've been successful with those as well. So it's sort of an anding personality that I have. You want to and it, meaning you want to make sure that you realize that this is a comprehensive thing that we do teaching music. And we want it to all come together so that the students are the best musicians they can possibly be.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much, Chris. Yeah, for sharing the morning with us. Well, your afternoon, our morning, some evenings, depending on where we are. Yeah, I know that we'll all walk away from our screens having new ideas and ways of approaching audiation, which is absolutely wonderful for that. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Oh, thank you. Well, how about some big love for Greg and Yana too? Oh my goodness.
Well, and thanks to everyone for coming. Yeah, and for registering and signing up. This is wonderful. It was such a great response that we had, and we're hoping to be able to do more of these in the future. And I will be uploading, because this was recorded, so I will be, once it's kind of converted and rendered and I've uploaded it to its temporary place, I'll send a link out so that everybody knows, and then you can watch it. And it'll probably only be up for about 3 weeks, and then it'll be taken down. But it'll be accessible for those that weren't able to attend today as well.
Yeah, and if you have any interest in the materials from any of the GIA materials, you can go to the GIA website and look at all the things that are available for this kind of thing. All of my materials are on my website. So if you go to that space and go to what is called Works, then you can see the developing musicianship, the jump right in, all the things that are there. That'll take you basically to the GIA website, where you can find all kinds of materials that would promote audiation and that kind of thing.
Great. Okay, and thank you everyone for attending, and we'll see you next time around.
Thank you very much, everybody. Great to see you, and I hope I see you again.